This program is designed to provide general information with regards to the subject matters covered. This information is given with the understanding that neither the hosts, guests, sponsors, or station are engaged in rendering any specific and personal, medical, financial, legal, counseling, professional service, or any advice. You should seek the services of competent professionals before applying or trying any suggested ideas.
Good morning, everybody. Welcome back to episode number 2. We are going to continue with the handwriting today on the Zodiac killer and Jack Tarrance. I know we made it through a little bit of the traits of the Zodiac last week, but I wanted to go ahead and revisit those from beginning to end so that you knew what you were looking for as we discussed the messages or what you were going to put together as we cover the information. So the traits of the suspect writings of the Zodiac has what I refer to as poetic reference or style writing. So it could literally mean a poem, a portion of a poem, and we'll cover some of the communications that surround those type of inserts. And he also had the ability to execute lengthy communications while disguising natural handwriting to a good degree. However, he did tend to fall back into natural habits at the bottom end of those letters, which was allowing me to make some connections even to the disguised handwriting, where he would leave behind his own personal traits. The Zodiac's choice of pen, as I gleaned from many of the communications, was a blue ink felt tip pen. The Pilot Razor we showed you last week, which was Jack's favorite pen, is very consistent with that particular type of ink. Zodiac also uses spaces between syllables, splitting words, making them appear as though they're two words. He also combines several words and writes them as one, like what's his name? And that's 3 words combined as one, written as one. You use statements involving newspaper reporting, movies, and published works you'll see throughout. The references and the statements that were made, which are indicative of Southern upbringing. So we have Southern references like breeches or barrels of fun, and we'll discuss those as we go through. The cryptic messages using letters, symbols, and numbers. We also know that he used various styles from typewriting to hand printing to cut and paste type communications. He had an advanced knowledge of Morse code and ciphering. Clearly, these are the ciphers, some solved, most not solved. Law enforcement would like us to believe that many of the murders' coded messages were unsolvable. However, throughout this presentation, I'll show that they must have been solved but kept secret. Narcissists. The Zodiac was a narcissist with the desire to degrade local law enforcement. He believes they're far more trained than the police or the FBI. He proclaims not even the FBI or CIA can crack him. So he must be part of something even more or bigger, larger, or even more secret than the CIA. Indications that there are probably unknowing and knowing partners in some of these crimes. Statements are made in regards to drug use and descriptions of hypnosis-like states during commissions of crimes. We'll see reference to a blueprint for a killer, as if to say the killer was designed by society or whatever society he was a member of. There are references to underground societies and many references to bodies being underground throughout the crime sprees. He claims to have killed by knife, by rope, by gun, and by fire. He also claimed at one point he wasn't going to tell us how he did this anymore, and they would look like accidents and a suicide. He claims to have bisected victims. There's other play of time, rabbits, and location that actually play a huge role in these communications. So let's go ahead and start moving into some of those letters. Where is my letter? What in the world? Technical glitch. I have never seen this happen before. Let me see if I can swap computers for this presentation. Jason, we're having an issue. I don't know why my images are not coming up at this point. All right. Hopefully we can see this now. And I'm going to move forward. Okay, here we go. See if I can get my, yes, perfect. Okay, so we're looking now, and we've gone too far. There we go. Okay, so now we're looking at some of Jack's handwriting. One of the things that I note that Jack has the ability to write straight on unlined paper. Jack's typical address sequence for city and state is executed with no comma between the two, and he usually spells out the first few letters of the state. It seems that he's not really familiar with state acronyms, so he uses the first few letters to distinguish his state reference. And this is the same for the Zodiac Killer communications, and we'll see that as we go through them. Using every last bit of paper from the left to the right margin is also basically something that the Zodiac did, and we'll see those here in a few minutes. Jack's preference were half sheets of paper to write on. He would fold a sheet in half and write on them like it was a book, or he would use 5x7 sheets of paper for personal correspondence. So on line 13, this is where I talk about the breaking of the words, where he wrote the word someone. It appears as though that single word was broken in half by the pause between some and one. And of course, we'll see this with the Zodiac doing it with himself and the word cannot, and many of the other crime communications that we're going to share and go over. This is two versions of Jack's handwriting. One was a personal writing on the back of a picture. The other one was an actual report that he completed for Hewlett Packard when he was in the capacity of contract security. The next one is that we know that there was a time in which Jack was working for Arizona State University back in 1993 and Purina Mills Feed Company. So the paper here shows that Jack clearly had extensive knowledge of the workings of a computer, and we can see him actually using that computer lingo inside of here. Some of Jack's notable traits are his capital letter M, which is made in a 4-stroke construction, and he writes them as small as a lowercase, but it is still an uppercase construction, and the middle section goes down to the baseline. This was one of the things that I would be looking for in handwriting to see if that was accidentally dropped or left somewhere. He also used what I refer to as a 4-stroke capital N, And that is seen inside. Let's see if I can get my cursor to work here. The 4-stroke letter N, it actually looks more like a W. You can see it right here in the word run. So it has the beginning stroke that comes down to the baseline. It goes back up in the middle, back down, and back up again, which actually makes it look more like a W than the letter N. But again, it is a capitalized letter in the middle of lowercase writing. Jack definitely had a propensity for writing what I refer to as the bell top A. And we can see that bell top A, let's see here, right here in the word data, we see it twice. So again, this is going to be something I'm going to be looking for inside of these communications, because it is a sign that Jack is writing them. He also has what I refer to as a decreasing middle zone, usually at the end of words like looking over here and running, where the ing becomes smaller than the balance of the word. So that's a reduction in size as it tapers off at the end of the word. Some of Jack's other traits, which are some of the first ones I found, is his cursive written letters in the middle of print, D, O, and Q. And the T that he uses is more like your copybook print T, where the lowercase t's actually have a hook on them. Let me see if I can find one in here for you real quick. Right here in the word it, we can see that there's a small curvature at the bottom of the T, making it look more like a printed or a font style T than the regular straight T bar. He also uses hyphens in the middle of his writing, which you can see here between stops and no program. This one becomes large because this is something that the Zodiac killer consistently used to break up words, as if he was pausing. So instead of using a comma, he would hyphen and begin the next statement. Here's some more of Jack's handwriting. So we have his hide tanning recipe, a personal letter to his mother, and then the sale of a gun to a gentleman out here in Rio Linda. I did actually try to make contact with this gentleman. I wasn't capable of finding him. I got close, but no luck. So here we're seeing 3 more styles of handwriting for Jack. And then, of course, this is a 5th style. To the right is a note that he was taking while he was repairing a vehicle. So he was making notes as to what he needed for parts. And we see these very elongated type letters like the C's and the G's, almost swinging and flowing, which we will see in one of the actual Zodiac communications, which was very close. The letter to the left is the Melvin Belli letter. This was the first letter I was given by my mentor, the only letter for that matter, in which to make a comparison, because I did not have a reference for Zodiac writing when I was contacted by Dennis Kaufman. This also happens to be the most disguised writing that the Zodiac ever perpetrated. And you can see that by the strict copybook form at the top. So the writing really begins highly manipulated. So it's less chance of finding individual characteristics from the actual author. But as we went down, we'll see the second arrow down, we start to see that facade fall apart. We start to see him come back to his natural form. And then as we get down to the third arrow, we start to see spelling mistakes, and we see even a more freer writing. One of my favorite letters for the Zodiac and Jack is this letter Q right here in the word requires. And we're going to take a look at that in comparison to Jack and the Zodiac here in a few minutes. Right at the bottom, we start to see what I refer to as those cursive O's. We see the loop inside the O. So when I first examined this document, I think I had about 5 pieces of Jack's handwriting, and I was up until about 4 o'clock in the morning, and I found 20 characteristics in this disguised writing. It made me long for more, which means I needed to make contact with Dennis and find out if he had additional writings from the Zodiac, and he was able to supply me with a majority of the documents that I received in the Zodiac case. We see that they have what I refer to as the double letter spelling error, and that could mean that they failed to use the double letter, or they added a double letter where it wasn't necessary. And I show that in Jack's writing to the right here in the word vacuum and in the word canister. These are two of the styles of writing that we found for the Zodiac. One is the channel, we call it the Channel 9 newsletter. This particular document, we also see the double letter spelling error in the word gonna. We see the hyphen between killing again, hyphen, please hold the applause. And applause is broken, so we'll be talking about how he would break the word and carry it to the next line without actually even using a hyphen. So we have the misuse of a hyphen to stop and start sentences, and then we have no use of hyphen when they actually carry on from one word to the next. Down here in number 3 with Pat Boone, we see this hyphen again between who he's speaking about and then what he wants to say. Down here with Susan Atkins, again, hyphen to break the following statement that he is making. Of course, here we see 20% quota, hyphen, after all. And then down here, hey, hyphen, 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 you actors, hyphen. It's something that is continuously used inside of the Zodiac writing. To the right, we have the red phantom, which is related to Riverside. However, Zodiac did come to the forefront and claim that activity at one point in time. This is one of the poetic style writings that I refer to. But again, what we see is the editor hyphen, came hyphen he, disorder hyphen. So hyphens are a huge thing. And then if we look up here, we see that Jack's same exact use of hyphenation says hyphen, use, yes, hyphen. And he actually broke yesterday using the hyphen, but then he hyphened and started another sentence beginning with A. We also see the long straight comma, which, let's see if I can find one of those for you. That one's not as long. We'll cover the commas in the end of the actual handwriting examination. Here we see that the killer states that he can write anonymously, so he clearly understands the dynamics of handwriting, and that if he removes certain features or if he conceals certain features, that an identification would likely not be made. The reason for this is that the forefathers of handwriting, Albert Osborne, had stated at one point in time, one single fundamental difference precludes identification of a single author. So if Jack knew that premise, then that means that he could remove a single letter or form a single letter differently than he does in his own writing, and believe that an identification could not be made based on that. This letter to the right, the red phantom, is about a columnist, Mark H. Spinelli, who writes for the Chronicle. This columnist must have written something wrong about Zodiac, or another suspect wrongly being accused of the Zodiac crimes would preempt or cause him to write in and tell them how they had it wrong, or just like we saw in the finale letter where he said Pat Serial had it wrong. His profile was wrong. We'll see other areas where the suspect wrote in and indicated either the FBI had a composite wrong, the law enforcement had stated that he had completed something or killed in a certain way, which was not how he did it. So he needed to straighten that out as well. He really wants his story to be told from his point of view. Here are additional letters. So this is number 4 and 5 of the handwriting samples in the different ways that the Zodiac actually wrote. I noted that there was almost always some attempt of small drawings and icons that were used in each of the communications. This would be another example of one of the poetic style writings. He plunged himself into the billowy wave and an echo arose from the suicide's grave. So we'll also hear about suicide by ocean, or the appearance that he walked off into the ocean and killed himself. That will come later. It's closely matching actually a letter I found back in the late 1940s. It was called the Sorry Mary suicide letter, found at the beach near Santa Barbara, and the suspect took credit for the Black Dahlia murders and supposedly walked off into the ocean to kill himself. Jack had actually, I found out from Dennis that Jack had actually just seen The Exorcist, the movie, in December, and this particular communication, the Exorcist letter, was written in January. We find, again, the poetic style and the use of hyphenation. Once again, let's see here. Right up here at the top where he breaks comedy, he hyphens and continues the last three letters, when clearly if he had just removed the hyphen, he could have fit the balance of that particular word there. He just chooses to break, almost like an editor of a newspaper with limited space would break and carry over to the next line. Here again, we see some of the breaking of the words himself. We see, well, he's misspelled suicides, but we see the suicide part, and the tit willow is the actual poetic reference of this. We see here in the word something, that reducing ing zone where it actually becomes smaller than the balance of the word. And then here is some of the graphics. I believe that this graphic itself was related to a soy bottle found on one of the victims, or that one of the victims had a soy bottle on her that had one of these particular style logos on it. Now, to the right, this is an interesting letter, because when I needed to find out about the size that these letters actually were, because I was being told by my mentor that the middle zone of the Melvin Belli letter was far too large and to be the same author as Jack, because Jack did not write that big, it came to my attention that that letter had actually been manipulated. The pixel width on it had been enlarged 1,000 by 1,000, and it had been presented to me as an 8.5 by 11 size document. So when I went back to Dennis Kaufman and I said, my mentor says it cannot be the same person because the writing is too large, Dennis informed me that the letter that I was looking at was not actually an 8.5 by 11. So I asked him to somehow prove this to me. So he took me to Tarrance Pascow's home, who was one of the original document examiners in the Zodiac case. And we had quite a nice conversation in regards to the letters that he viewed. He indicated that the letters were approximately 5 by 7s, folded in 3, and the envelope it wasn't actually an envelope. It was folded in the way that the letter itself became its own envelope. So these were things that I was not told up front, but at the same time, I was questioning this letter over here to the right, which is from 1986. I believe that they did not show this to the public, and likely on purpose, because here we see that the Zodiac is taking credit for less or more than 100 killings in the California area. And if this was sent in 1986, it meant that the Zodiac was still very much well and alive and still perpetrating his crimes. And Mr. Pascow did indicate that this document, at the time it was received, it was concurred upon by the document examiners involved that the letter was in fact from the Zodiac killer. I'm still trying to find the two people that he killed up here in Sacramento by the freeway. I originally thought that was the Maggioris, but that has since been solved on the California or the Golden State killer. I'm sorry. So basically, when I was talking about the use of state abbreviations, we see over here NA for Nevada. So he's actually claiming this plus or minus 100 people are throughout the state of California and Nevada, and that the SFPD are still at 0 suspects for this. So brings us to the actual address construction, and we see to the editor, San Francisco Chronicle. He likes to make a 4-line construction out of his address sequences. But when we get to the bottom, this is where I talk about the extra long straight comma between the city and the state. And then he actually uses 5 letters out of California rather than just doing the CA like he did up here at the top. At the particular time this letter in 1986 is sent, Jack is actually living in Roseville, California at this point in time, and he's working at Hewlett-Packard as a contract security guard, a sergeant, if you will. And this information was provided by Dennis Kaufman, but I was also able to confirm that through Jack's own paperwork, which we'll see when we get to the 1980s. So let's go ahead and start talking about some handwriting. I think this is the most important part of this case, because once the identification is made, we can begin to walk through the shoes of Jack and through his life and see where he was involved or surrounding the proximity of most of these killings that we're going to talk about. I completed this examination in full for the FBI. The full presentation can be found on YouTube under Finding the Zodiac channel. There are 3 segments to it, and I cover all of the handwriting from Jack and the Zodiac. But what we're about to look at is actually going to be a condensed version, because I just wanted to bring together the points, not all of the disguised handwritings or even the manic writings, because the manic writings appear to be hastily written and with less care or concern. So we don't really see, we see matches. Let me not say that the wrong way. We see matches, but when it's written in haste, we see that the letters actually diminish and some of the value is not there to make a comparison. So we're going to start with the letter A, go through Z, and we're going to talk about those letters and how they compare. I start here with the capital letter A's. One of the things about disguised handwriting is that you can tell by the irregular form of the disguise. When you line up all the letter A's, one will almost look different from the next, and that's what I call irregular. We should probably see more of a nice pattern. We should probably see more of a nice pattern in regards to the actual letter and the arrangement and the shapes that are consistent. When it's inconsistent, then we generally are dealing with somebody who is attempting to disguise their handwriting. So lining them all up together allows me to see what the disguise is, also allows me to see what is consistent about those letters. And that tells me what I can actually count on as a trait or something that I might find in your handwriting. So starting with the letter A's, anything that is labeled with a K is going to be Jack's handwriting. That's considered a known sample. Anything listed with a Q is the Zodiac writing because it is a question document. So I have lined up several of Jack's A's, all of the different styles that I could actually find inside of his writing, from these swaying A's with a rounded top to a very sharp pointed A that has an entrance stroke to the left of it, to the rounded top A's, and then actually to these leaning pointed A's. So as we go through the Zodiac stuff, we can clearly see here are the leaning rounded A's. We also have the curved pointed top A's, as seen here. And then we have the leaning to the right rounded A's and the leaning to the right pointed top A's. So right here, to be able to find an A that matches every single one of Jack's A's in the Zodiac communication is a home run. The one thing I would expect to see if it was the same author is that they used every style in their arsenal. And if I hadn't mentioned to this point, we all have approximately 2 to 8 ways that we can actually write any given letter in the alphabet. And this is proof right here. We see 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 different styles of A's from Jack. And then all of those A's can actually be found in the Zodiac's handwriting. Moving into the lowercase A's, I believe that this letter A, the bell top A, was one of the ones that were the most concealed by the Zodiac because he knew that this would be a home run hit. He does obviously have the capability of writing A's in different fashions. I found several of them that he wrote that were actually consistent with the Zodiac's A's. And when we get into some of the disguised handwriting by the Zodiac, I found that there were a lot of these ones with these high backs. And these high backs are an indication of this person normally starts in a different position or place. Otherwise, we would not see that raise up and come down like we do. So all of these ones are just barely missing the actual overhang on the A themselves. And I do believe that they were present in some letters. We'll talk about that when we get to Robert Graysmith's book, where we see that the bell top A, I believe, was actually removed from a communication. And the more that this could be suppressed, or the more characteristics that they could remove from these writings before presenting it to the public, is a huge indication that they didn't want this to be solved, or they didn't want this to be figured out. To date, I cannot find any place that claims to actually have an original communication on hand. I've been told that they're missing, they're gone, detectives walked off with them, had them in their garage, they're not valid for use as a piece of evidence anymore. I've heard all kinds of crazy things, but the bottom line is I still have not seen an original communication in this case. This bell top A down here, I thought was extremely interesting to bring up, because as I was going through the FOIA files, I found that they were taking handwriting samples from suspects and then specifically asking them to write these bell top A's, which I didn't understand. If I haven't seen one of these bell top A's in these communications, why are they asking for somebody to write with a bell top A? That leads me back to, I believe that this has been removed from the communications that have been shown to the public. Otherwise, they would not ask a suspect to repeatedly write this bell top A in hopes to find a match to a bell top A. In the letter B's, we found at least 3 or 4 different styles of the letter B that Jack used. As we go through them, we see the ones that actually have this very thin bottom bowl of the B where it tapers down into a point. This was definitely something that could be seen and was actively being done inside of the Zodiac handwriting, where the buckle or the belt of the B does not come back and touch the stem, which is, again, a sign that's found inside of the Zodiac's writing. Also, to the degree where the beginning bowl at the top is not connected to the stem, so we see this disconnect as it wraps around. Again, something clearly seen in the Zodiac's handwriting. As we go down the line for the other B's, we start to see things like this flattened bowl that occurs here. We can see the flattened bowl that is occurring here. We also see this angular portion where it's pointed on the right-hand side. We can see that also as well in the Zodiac's handwriting. And as we go over to this side, we see where this bowl is broken and there's visibly a space between the top and the bottom bowl as if it's 2 separate strokes. We also see that happening in Jack's handwriting as well. The lowercase b's, we had the same type of similarities where the slant of the actual stem of the B slants to the right, and we can see the various styles of the letter B that was used by Jack. And if you just simply jump down, you start to see all of those same style of B's in the Zodiac's writing as well. Very interesting. So we're now 4 for 4 on the letters, the construction, the shape, the slant, the size, the ratio. Everything is lining up pretty much in this sequence. The letter C's I pulled out just to show that long swooping C that we saw in the notes that he was taking for writing down the parts for the car. And then, of course, this long sweeping C that we saw also from the Zodiac with this entrance stroke or this hook at the top is clearly seen as well in Jack's handwriting. The slant of the actual C itself, I have noted by this bar that comes down the side. So I would take a bar and I would lay it down for a slanted position on Jack's letter, and then I would copy and paste this exact same bar over the top of the Zodiac's writing to see if that's consistent. I also found that in Jack's letter C's, he had this curvature on the bottom, so instead of rounding out downward, it rounds out topward, and we could see that also happening in the Zodiac's handwriting as well. The range of variation between the C's are extremely consistent, both in beginning strokes and ending strokes. They show identical ways in which both the Zodiac and Jack use them. The range of the slants match, we talked about that. So while Jack actually thought he was disguising his letters, he wasn't really doing that. I don't think that people seem to realize that handwriting is brainwriting, and that is indicative when they think they're going to disguise something. They believe that they're using something that they don't typically use, when really they're just tapping into the arsenal of images and perceptions that they have about letters. And so they begin using letters or forms that they actually write themselves. And given enough handwriting samples, you will find that they actually used what they thought was disguised, when in fact it was just one of the forms that they have or are capable of doing. In the letter D's, we had, again, this tapering that was occurring down at the bottom, just like in the B's. We see that tapering down in the Zodiac's writing. And in fact, the form itself is very strikingly similar. We have this overhang on the D here. We have the overhang on the top of the D here. Again, reduced down to these thinner states that we see, where it's nice and wide at the top, and as it gets to the bottom, it narrows out. If these letters were seen by themselves, a person would have a hard time even determining they were a D. So it's interesting to note that they both shared that comparison. And when they actually did write a copybook D, or one that was more consistent with copybook, we see that even those shapes were pretty much identical. The lowercase d was also another place that I found that they shared a consistency. We see that they don't close in the top side of the D here. Same thing is going on here. We have the looped stem that is pointed at the top. Again, another match. And as far as shape and form and construction goes, it was pretty much similar with each and every type of D that I could find that Jack had completed. We found that the Zodiac also completed those same style Ds, including this one at the end that has this small hook or upstroke that comes off of the bottom of the stem. We see that's happening in both of their writings. The letter E. So here we have some capital and some lowercase together. Here I just wanted to note that obviously as they construct it, it is a single stroke for the top and bottom of the E, and then the crossbars for the top and the middle portion are separate strokes. We have this rounded out section with this curvature that happens kind of like I was showing you in the letter C. That also happens in the letter E, where he runs down and then actually curves upward instead of being straight or following the baseline, which tends to happen in a lot of their E's. So we can see here that curvature again is also found in the Zodiac's curvature. The slant or the position of the E and the way it leans forward is also identical. All the way even to, I thought this one was kind of an interesting E because it looks kind of bulky on the bottom and smaller on the top, but we actually seen that the Zodiac was following those same traits. The lowercase e was also consistent in shape, form, entrance, from having this entrance stroke on the back side of it, which is seen in both authors' handwriting, to the fact that they do not complete the actual bottom portion of the E, so it's kind of left as if it's hunched over or falling forward, and we can see that occurring in the Zodiacs as well. In the letter F, again, just finding what, of course, I'm limited on some of these capital letters from Jack, but it turns out even being limited, I was able to locate and find F's that the Zodiac wrote that were consistent, including where the crossbar in the middle is longer than the top crossbar. We can see that happening in the Zodiac's letters. And then the lowercase letter F is actually extremely consistent as well. We have this hook at the top of both of them. We have the curvature to the back side of the stem, which can be seen in both. And then, of course, the what I call the TF. So these are actually Fs here, but they did not complete the top portion of it. So it appears as though it's a T rather than an F. Again, that is a consistency between both of them. In this particular letter F, we see an upstroke on the bottom to the left-hand side as he completes the stem, and that is something that you can clearly see inside of the Zodiac's handwriting. So they both have creative Fs. They look frilly. They look more like script than they do a standard print, but that is the way both of them printed, and it was consistent between both. The letter G was a little more scarce in the Zodiac's writing than it was in Jack's writing. I was able to find at least 3 or 4 different styles of G's that Jack actually made. However, if we go down into the ones that were available in the Zodiac's writing, we find that they actually constructed those G's almost identical when you compare this particular G to this one, where it looks like he made a circle and a round and then crossed it like he was crossing an A or a T, and exited outward. So again, very consistent in the form and shape, including the way this point is executed off of the side of the G. We can see that that occurred in the Zodiac as well. The lowercase g's are, again, similar. As I go through and I pull out the G's that are completed by Jack, I can look into the Zodiac's writing and find pretty much similar G's. This Q8G with the open top here is consistent with the K2G. We have a straight stem off of the bottom. Even when we did see kind of a curvature, it wasn't really what you would expect to see out of a copybook print G, where it actually has a hook or a curvature at the bottom of the stem. So both of them clearly used, and even the slants on the backside of the G's are consistent with each other. They clearly used the same style G's all the way around. In the letter H, I noted that we had the right side of the stem. Where did my cursor go? Come on. On the right side of the stem, we have the shorter right side than the left side. We have the shorter left top side than the right side. We had the width and the ratio of the size of the letter was consistent with each other. And in the lower H section, we start to see the different H's that Jack used. And as you go down the line, you're going to see that the H's that the Zodiac used were all extremely similar, if not almost identical. And here at the end, we see these are the more manic style H's that I talk about. I believe that he either wrote after killing, or maybe he was in a manic state. Maybe he was even on some type of a substance that caused him to write with great haste. Either way, all of these, again, are consistent with one another as far as handwriting is concerned. The letter I, the capital letter I, we got to see that a lot because the Zodiac liked to talk about himself a lot, but I did break them down to show that we had the crossbar on the bottom was smaller than the crossbar on the top. We had the broken bar where it doesn't actually touch the stem, so we can see a space between the stem and the actual cross of the top, and that again is consistent with the Zodiac's writing. They both also use the letter I without any crossbars at all, so consistency again. One of the bigger things that I noted in the Zodiac and Jack's writing in the lowercase i's is the use of the circle I dot. This was capable of being found in many of Jack's writing and in the Zodiac's writing as well. A heavy period dot, or a heavy period, or a circular period, or a circular I dot is consistent throughout both authors' handwriting. In the area of the letter J, the capital J from Jack appears down here at the bottom. So typically speaking, Jack, I only found one letter J where he actually used a crossbar at the top, but we can see that the shapes of these particular J's, especially in comparison to Q8 over here, is very consistent with a curvature that curves in and then comes down. We see that happening in Jack's handwriting too, where he curves in from the top and then exits out to the left. The lowercase j's are far more consistent with each other since there were more of them to actually glean from. Jack's j's tend to be almost straight like his letter G, so we can't even tell that these are j's. They look more like I's, except for the fact that they actually extend below the baseline. That kind of gives you a hint of what type of letter is being used. So from using just a slight curvature at the bottom of the letter J, as the Zodiac did, to using a straight line J, which is consistent between the both. Sorry, I'm choking here. Also, back to the actual curvature of the letter J, even in the lowercase, it looks more like an S. Sorry, guys. It looks more like a curvature of a letter S than it does the letter J, but that is also consistent with Jack's handwriting and the Zodiac's handwriting. The letter K's are also something that I find, I believe that some of them were manipulated or altered for the public's view. However, between several communications together, I was able to find how or figure out how the Zodiac was actually articulating this letter K. It seemed to be a big thing for both the document examiners and law enforcement to find the individual that creates this style of lowercase k, which is where the we call the arm of the K, which is this top stroke here, comes back to the actual stem, and then the leg or the foot of the K comes off the middle of that arm, which we can see that that is clearly what was occurring inside of the Zodiac's handwriting. When he wrote the lowercase k, he always carried the arm straight back and positioned the leg somewhere at the midpoint of that arm as it came down. In the capital K's, I noted Jack for having this curvature or this loop in the buckle of the K, which can be seen pretty much on the outside to the inside of the stem. And there was actually a letter K in the Zodiac's writing where that loop appeared, and that loop was extremely consistent from the actual ratio and size of the arm to the actual placement of the leg and where the loop actually hits about mid-center of the stem. So again, these are all characteristics that point towards an identification or a match. And mind you, it's never one letter that helps me to make an identification. It's a compilation of them all. So I just want you to know that as we go through the presentation, while I say identification, it's only because I know the results of this exam and I know that in the end, everything clearly is a match. The letter L, I noted the angular portion back here with kind of, again, that curvature that happens in the bottom portion of the L. You can see just visually that the slant of the stem for both of these authors are extremely consistent, if not identical. And so here we have all the different type of L's that that I could find in Jack's arsenal. And as you go down the Zodiac's writing, we have the one with the curvature in the bottom of the L. We have one with an upper curvature, an arch in the L, which is consistent once again with Jack and the Zodiac. We also have what looks like the greater than, less than sign type L. And of course, this one was another one of those that reminded me of a greater than, less than sign, but we see that the stem of the L is not as tall as it should be to distinguish that as an L. They're more, the ratio of the bottom to the stem is more even, more squared out. And then, of course, all the way to this curvature, which curves downward. And again, we see the curvature downward in that particular L. The letter M's were some of the ones that I knew that I would find. It did take me some time, but after sorting through many communications, I was actually able to show that Jack did at some point in time refer back to his own use of the letter M. So up here at the top, we have the Zodiacs, different styles of M's, and you can see what I mean by the randomness. No one M really looks like the next. There's always some type of major inconsistency with them. That tells me that he is attempting to disguise his handwriting, or at least he believes this is some type of disguise. Because Jack clearly uses, as I discussed before, the 4-stroke M, where the center comes all the way back down. So if somebody wanted to disguise their handwriting, they're going to attempt to remove the features that identifies them. And we see that he does everything but try to bring that middle back down. But when I went in and I found some of Jack's M's in his own writing, I started to find this particular style M where he doesn't always come straight back down to the bottom. And it is a 2-part construction where the stem is drawn and then the pen is picked up and he begins the humps and comes out at the end. That is consistent with the construction or the disguise that the Zodiac believes he's using. A couple of the other M's that I found between the 2 authors, the top here being Jack's 2 and the bottom being the Zodiac's 2. Again, extremely consistent in form and shape. And it looks like we are done. We are going to have to catch up with the lowercase m's next week. I appreciate everybody's time. You guys have a great rest of your week and Merry Christmas.